So if you think about that for a small to medium-sized business coming out of this sort of COVID and heading into recessions, I mean, what are you going to do to survive and grow? And so when we came up with Blackpearl, it was around transforming a very common, everyday used business tool into something that helps solve that problem.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain. Today we are with Nick Lissette, who is the founder and CEO at Blackpearl Group, about to list on the NZX. Welcome along, Nick. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, great. Before we jump in further, let's just say thank you to our show partners, Vodafone, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, Gorilla Technology, and Deal. Well, let's jump in. There's as always a bit that's happening locally that we want to talk about, and some things happening on the international stage. But really excited to come back, sort of really delve into Blackpearl and why you're landing on the stock exchange in New Zealand, and hear a little bit about your technology, what the sort of the history is, and where you'll be going next. So looking forward to that. But first up, we've seen this week media coverage around Foodstuffs North Island. And the use of facial recognition in some of their supermarkets. Now, these sort of topics catch my attention because there's sort of there's two quite different angles when we're applying certain bits and pieces of technology. There's kind of a really good aspect, and then there's potentially a darker aspect to those technologies, or a more worrying aspect to those technologies if they're not used and managed sort of appropriately and transparently. So look, hearing about the situation, that Foodstuffs, and really I guess you could look at all sorts of retailers are dealing with. We've got this ram raid situation that's been particularly hitting dairies and alcohol stores and so on. And in my neighbourhood in the last few days, we had somebody pass away from one of these incidents, and that's had a big bit of coverage this last week. And so you can kind of see why we've got stores that are looking to, well, how can technology help us out? And there are other sorts of technologies that can help. Someone enters a store. We saw some of these smoke machine cannons that I think Michael Hill Jewellery had sort of put in, so you could basically fill up a store very quickly with smoke. So somebody trying to rip off your store might struggle to actually see what's going on and be able to do that. But how expensive that is, and how quick it sort of takes to actually be effective. There's all sorts of options. But this week it's very much on this facial recognition piece. Now, what do we know? Well, there have been other retailers in New Zealand that have dabbled a little bit with aspects of facial recognition technology, or maybe more so probably in Australia. But there's been elements of it. And of course, it's not always talked about, so things can kind of happen on the quiet. And the technology is quite accessible. It's quite easy if someone taps into some services from, say, AWS or a Microsoft or Google. You can tap into these sort of AI type capabilities, and artificial intelligence can do a lot of lifting without necessarily super complex code and so on to achieve these things. But there's a flip side to to these things, and some worrying aspects to them. What are your feelings, Nick, on this this scenario that we find ourselves in? Because there does seem to be quite a bit of pushback already.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the important thing is it's talked about.
Yeah.
Technology in itself, in most instances, not good or evil. It's sort of how it's applied, and sometimes it can drift from one to the other. And we were talking a little bit before this about Black Mirror, and I was saying, how that most of those episodes are about a bit of technology that at the outset you think, oh, that's a really great idea. I can see the applications for that. And then it sort of goes a little dark. And so there's always that with all technology. And so I'm thinking about the supermarket situation. And again, 20 years ago, you turn up to a supermarket and you'd queue up with your trolley, and, there was always so much like what one. I was doing profiling then. I'd profile everyone in the queues before me and think, no, they look like they're not there to talk. They look like they've got the money. They don't have coupons. I'm going here, right?
Yeah.
Coupons. So there was already some profiling going on back then by me. So the situation about that is the user experience now is a lot better because they have taken out a lot of the checkouts that had operators there and given self-service as an option.
Yeah,
and the other
those loyalty cards as well, right? There's a bit of data stuff going on there as well.
There's a bit of that, and then I guess the other plus side to talk about the plus side of it is, of course, getting staff sometimes for those sorts of roles is really challenging. So you've got rising labour costs. There's inflation is something that's on top of all our mind, and the last thing you want to do is lay additional costs onto food, essential items like that. So there are all the great reasons why that you want to have it, because it's going to reduce theft, it's going to create self-checkout to be more seamless and create a better user experience. On the flip side, you don't need too much imagination to see how that could all be used for nefarious means. And so I think the interesting thing about this and what you bring up is the fact that it becomes a conversation, and then the consumer can then make a decision around whether they're okay with that customer experience and the fact that, hey, they might not queue up as much, they're going to pay less, but you're getting profiled versus someone that might have to bake in a little extra cost because they expect, X% theft and have that extra staffing costs. But that you're not going to have the facial recognition. So again, as long as I think there is a degree of transparency that technology is in place, then the consumer then can make a educated decision about how they want to proceed.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That how much you put in the hands of the consumer. There's a level there where, as consumers, often we just go for what's easy, right? And so I would look at TikTok, and there was what happened in the US under Trump. TikTok was going to be banned. That was where things had got to at one point. Mm-hmm. Now, that didn't end up proceeding. So we've ended up with this scenario where TikTok's just continued, and it's got absolutely massive. And there are probably some pretty genuine concerns there around data privacy, around algorithms, whole range of things that don't necessarily get a lot of airtime.
I mean, how often is your face getting captured on all these things?
That's
if you're going to be
right?
using these sorts of social media apps, if you're going to be using certain technology devices, I mean, again, the reality is in this modern world, unless you're going to live in a cave, you're going to be getting your face captured somewhere, and you can mitigate that to a degree on not using things. And sure, you might even use home delivery for your shopping and not want to go into a supermarket. But that's the world, isn't it? And it's prevalent, as you point out. It's not just there in a shopping situation. It could be right there in the thing that's in the palm of your hand, and that you're staring at,
maybe
inches from
tracking
your face
everywhere
all the
you go,
time.
and all sorts of things, right?
Crazy world, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's some really interesting aspects. Consumers won't necessarily make a change unless they can directly feel the pain in the short term. And so the transparency is important. Whether a consumer would change their habits because of facial recognition, risks associated with that at their local supermarket versus a longer walk or a longer drive to another supermarket. So, I do think this is a really fascinating area. What I would like to see is just an increased level of transparency, and there's probably some pros and cons for that from the perspective of foodstuffs and their stores. But let's, at this point, sort of sit back and watch a little bit. I do like they've talked about that they're flushing the data on a regular basis. Now, I think 5 days was mentioned. Well, do you need to keep it 5 days? Can you flush it? Can you flush it more regularly than that? I imagine there's a level of, well, if some incident happened, we want to be able to go back and pick that person out, add them to the list of people to be looked out for because we recognise there was an issue with this person. But how long do you need to keep that window open? Is it an hour, a day, 5 days? I'm not sure, but I would tend to think you want to have that as short as possible. That said, as you talk about, well, there's footage, photos in lots of different places. There are security cameras all over. We were talking about it, maybe it was last week. Traffic cameras where there's a lot of them now around Auckland, as well as ones for other police purposes other than traffic. So
there's two cameras right here.
That's right. Yeah,
we're on one now.
You're being watched. High definition footage is being captured and sold to the highest bidder.
Awesome.
And we'll see what they can use that biometric data for.
I'd like to see AI try and biometric this face, pal. Like, it's a bit of a mess. It's been broken noses over the years. All these things. I don't think AI wants anything to do with this face.
Funny. So look, I think we've got to keep these conversations going. I would say I'm not very relaxed about what's going on with foodstuffs. I hope we get more transparency from them, but I think we're off. They're off to a positive start with sharing a few details. I would, one of the things that I read said that they weren't disclosing what those 29 supermarkets were. I hope they're disclosing it at those supermarkets, at least, even if they don't want to give a list out to the media and press release type form or what have you. And let's keep this discussion going. But I'm not super relaxed about it. Put it that way. But alongside that is all the other cameras, all the other things where footage is being taken and stored. And so I can, and I totally get it from their perspective that they want to be as safe as possible. And there is a direct flow on to the consumer, right? We've got this situation in New Zealand where there's this pressure on the two main supermarket chains around prices and margins. And so you can see from their perspective, a store that's got to pay for a security person, let's say it's 2 shifts, 365 days a year, and I don't know, maybe they've got 50,000 customers that come through that supermarket on a regular basis over a year. That maybe that adds about $4 per head in terms of actual cost for your groceries over a year for those security folks. So if the technology can be in place, safe, secure, etc., then that maybe has an impact on your grocery bill. $4 may not seem like a lot, but when there's that overall pressure, and I don't know all the numbers here, I'm just making some up. You see it. Just these things they'll have a flow on in one direction or another. Right?
Totally will. I mean, you think about the checkout staff as an example. You have someone scanning everything for you. It's very hard to game the system. But with the self-checkouts, obviously that's quite a lot of people that are taken out of it. The cost of living, is high, and you have to pay, an appropriate wage for people doing that. Otherwise, they're not going to do the job. So, it's a classic one of these situations. We could sit here and argue both sides of the coin toss, and I have great arguments with myself on things like that. It's frightening.
Now, another local news is your listing, Blackpearl Group Limited, BPG. So we see there from NZX that they've put notice up. So it's official that Blackpearl Group is listing this Friday, $1.25 per share with 34.75 million shares by the looks of it, or thereabouts. So so really exciting. So we'll come back to that after we've chatted through some of the international happenings. Now I see HP and working to cut their costs by $1.4 billion. So, these layoffs are just continuing across so many aspects of the tech sector. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, it's really hard to get your head around it, because certainly here in New Zealand, but it seems to be, no way unique to New Zealand. Most organisations are struggling to find people, but we've had Twitter, obviously, has been pretty high profile, Microsoft, Meta, Google, now it's HP. In one direction, it's impossible to find people. In the other direction, people are getting laid off in these, what look like quite big chunks. But I suppose if you sort of, spread that out across the overall population of people employed in the tech world, it's certainly, a smaller percentage. And you would have to imagine most of them are going to land themselves other roles pretty swiftly. You certainly hope so.
I don't know about that. I think it's such an interesting thing you're seeing with these larger companies on the layoffs, and like I can't give you the exact figures, but if you look back to say like 2019, these companies still had more people than they did back then. So they had grown at a huge rate.
Yes,
and that's the interesting thing, is that the shift in the tech industry has changed from grow at all costs, throw everything in there, to now people being accountable for their bottom line a lot more than they were beforehand. And so if you think about that at a local level as well, or even a small company level, it's a scary prospect. And here's why. Because the access to capital for most private companies has been severely throttled. In North America, I've seen some statistics say it's down as much as 90%, and people are just not writing follow-on checks. So if you have your whole company engineered and structure engineered for growing at all costs, and then suddenly your fuel source or money gets cut, it gets pretty painful. Now, if you think about it here, there's a flow-on, and we take a little longer, but I will tell you that getting capital in New Zealand is super hard. And you'll see that, we've raised $22 million for Blackpearl over the time we've been in business. So I know a thing or two about raising capital, right? I've got, look at the shareholding register we've got. It's somewhat an all-star cast. So I bet myself I'm bound to raise capital, and it is so hard at the moment. And so here's the thing. Fun fact, how many startup SaaS companies get to 1 million ARR?
Yeah, no idea.
It's a sad number. It's 4%.
Yeah.
Do you know how many get to 10 million ARR? Only 4% of that 4%. Right. So it means 96% of SaaS businesses are not going to get to $1 million ARR. Now, think about developing a SaaS product, right? Unless you're like some 10x coder yourself and can do the whole thing soup to nuts, right? You're probably going to need 5 or 6 people dev team, and then some marketing money, and the cost of devs, right?
Yeah.
So you're already broke.
An annual run rate of $1 million is
it's not going to get you anywhere. You're already broke before you're out there. You're already broke before you hit, gone through 12 months. So here's the thing, all right? When there's access to money, and there's been money flushed through economies, on the Western economies because of COVID and pushed in, right? You can you can live off that. But when that's taken away, it means that you have to look for other ways to become effective. And I don't think those layoffs are just going to be big tech in the States. I think we're going to look at some hard times. And I just don't, and I know that there has been a labour shortage here historically, for over, I mean, we felt that as much as anyone. It was really hard to get people, but boy, oh boy, I think it's going to get interesting.
Yeah. That recurring revenue metrics actually, it's quite revealing, isn't it? Of those sort of numbers.
When you're on the wrong side of SaaS, it is the worst model, and when you're on the right side of SaaS, it is the best model. And it's so funny being, because we've done, painful, and then suddenly you wake up and you're getting a heap of money in your account all the time. Oh, this is great. Because it's there and it's sticky. So, yeah, it's hard, but it's so hard to get there, and you need a lot of capital and you need a lot of support. And if that dries up, then it's going to be hard times for a lot of companies.
And there's a huge impact depending on ambitions and pace as well, isn't there? So look at, for instance, Xero. I think they're well north of $1 billion. I can't remember what their current annual recurring revenues are now, but coming along quite nicely, shall we say?
Yep.
But their underlying costs are such that you don't look at the numbers and go, oh look, they're a wildly profitable company, because generally they're not, and so there's and that's a company that's obviously been around for a long time. It's an incredible New Zealand success story, but it's a good example to sort of look to for considering those challenges. Now they've deliberately decided to mostly focus on scaling and growing and building market share, and they've done very well in most markets. The US was a really hard nut for them to crack, but they seem to hold a key position there, even though they're not the leading player in terms of market share.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't be anywhere near where they've been if they had probably cut back and been conservative around growth. So there's a lot to be said about the wisdom of that approach at the time, where they were able to raise the funds and to take the tack they've taken.
Well, I mean, incredible testament to their team there, and obviously led by Rod Jury on it, because at that time that was an unfathomable business strategy in New Zealand. And I could be wrong, but I think they listed pre-revenue with maybe a couple of shekels on the books, right? There wasn't much there. And so they actually educated the whole New Zealand market about that way of doing things. Now, so full credit to them around that. Now, the other interesting sort of opposing strategy to that, so, obviously my main business partner, big shareholder and the chairman of Blackpearl is Tim Crown. Now, Tim and his brother Eric are the co-founders of Insight Enterprises. It's a Fortune 500 NASDAQ-listed technology company, and Tim is still chairman.
Yep.
So a couple of facts around that. He said they've never not made a profit. Every year they've made a profit. So he is all around, bottom line. And so interestingly, if you think about the model that we run and the amount of gross profit that you have, per sale, really if you get to around the $10 million line, which is, that is when you should be throwing off a good, amount of cash, and then you can use that for continual investment forward. But that's sort of like the magic number. So again, Xero had a very ambitious strategy, and they've got to where they've gone. They've got amazing market cap, and they've done a lot of things. There's other ways of doing it, and their way's great if you have access to cash.
Yeah. Now, into a few other topics. We've heard about what is purportedly 487 million WhatsApp users' mobile numbers up for sale on a hacking forum. Now, there are reports that WhatsApp are sort of denying the leak, but we're often seeing these sorts of things happen, and in one form or another, and there's all sorts of ways that we see data get out there, and whether it is directly WhatsApp or not, it's still really worrying as we see what should be confidential, something that you can entrust to organisations, continuing to leak out in one form or another. Bit of a worrying situation, but that's the nature of it. And look, we need to keep expecting more. I think of organisations that hold our data and continuing to raise the bar on the associated legislation and what happens when key information like mobile numbers and names ends out in the wrong place, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, data is the fuel of the fourth industrial revolution, right? It is the new oil. And I always say, if you don't believe me, then go and speak to Meta, or go and speak to Alphabet and Google, or go and speak to Amazon, right? Because their fuel supply got cut last year by Apple, and now Apple's worth more than all those three companies put together, right?
Yeah.
So if you have oil, then if you have that value, then people are going to try and steal it, and because there's a lot on the line. It's like There Will Be Blood, and that great movie about the old oil magnate back in the day, and he couldn't buy the oil field, so he just drilled diagonally and sucked all the guy's oil out, right? But that's the situation that we're in now, right? People are going to want to try and take that data, because that data is monetizable and you can make money from it. So it is really, constant fight against good and evil. If you're holding data in trust of customers, you have to fight very hard to protect that, and continually evaluate your processes, get better all the time, have a degree of transparency if things don't go well, and let people know that, hey, there's been an error here. This is what we've done about it. Put it in context and go on. So again, what we're talking about before, transparency and accountability in this world. But as long as companies need to understand that customers are their lifeblood. If you're not looking after your customers, right, you should go out of business, because they're paying you, they're paying your staff, and they should be your reason to live. And so you've got to look after their data.
Yeah, there's a challenge there where the user is the product, as it were, and you don't look after their data. But really, Meta have a lot of challenges from different directions, and part of this comes with scale, right? And most that have been in New Zealand for a good few years and around the tech and telecommunications sector will remember when telecom was the company that we kind of loved to hate. Right now, they went through a rebrand. I think they've positioned themselves well. They've made themselves sort of competitive price wise. Quite a range of changes in a range of areas, but they've addressed things of being the most or being very expensive compared to other offerings, and maybe not so easy to deal with. I think they've worked very, very hard on that front, but Meta, I think, is still in a very difficult position, and whether this particular scenario ends up to be something that's their fault and they're in the wrong, we will see. A couple of other interesting news items. I want to go on to sort of geopolitical things, but I see a couple regarding the kind of auto world, and this move to really more tech-enabled businesses and products for the auto sector. So we hear about Mecedes-Benz introducing a subscription fee to get better acceleration. BBC reporting on that. And then Jaguar Land Rover apparently in a situation where they're needing to reduce some of their factory output in the UK because of chip shortages. Ooh. So there's some interesting aspects as the threads of technology become more and more dominant and key to the auto industry. And so you've got your Tesla at one area where they're still in that very much that startup mentality. They seem to be able to move quickly. If they can't get a chip, they seem to be able to rejig things, code, put in another chip to do the job in some cases. Very sort of fast and agile. That probably brings with it a range of risks and challenges that aren't normal for an industry that's so safety focused. But then their kind of auto updates have helped them out. The Mecedes-Benz one with wanting to charge a monthly fee for acceleration, I think, is an interesting one because we've seen this on other aspects. I think one of the maybe it was BMW was in the news a little while ago for it wasn't acceleration. It might have been having your steering wheel heated or the maybe some of the seats heated and so on. And to a degree, we've seen Tesla go down this track where you might pay a fee, but usually it's a one-off fee to unlock things. They have a monthly fee on their FSD feature, which, although it stands for full self-drive, certainly doesn't deliver it by any stretch.
Oh, I've got a Tesla. If you, I tell you what, there's nothing more frightening than going onto that self-drive mode. Roller coasters are nothing compared to having that thing trying to steer through New Zealand roads for you. I'm lucky to be here today.
Well, I'm looking forward to the FSD beta coming to New Zealand, but I don't know whether it'll actually be anywhere near safe. But we will see. So some similar experiences to you, but I've stayed safe using it so far. But we'll see how it plays out. Now on the geopolitical front, there seems to be a lot of sort of activity here. Sort of three things that caught my attention. Reports from the UK side and the US side around bans in terms of selling and usage of Chinese tech. We had Huawei and ZTE mentioned. Also seen mention from some of the big security camera companies, Hikvision, Dahua. These are really big companies that have been the prominent go-tos in probably in most countries around the world, and they've delivered that sort of balance of capability, versus price, and it's seemed to have been quite well balanced, and so their products have been very very successful. Yet we're seeing a whole lot of pushback on that. Also on the geopolitical front, Yandex, which is often sort of referred to as the Russian Google, they seem to be in a challenging position at the moment, and so they are now trying to work out what does their business look like in the future as a big tech giant, the main search engine in Russia, but they're across so many other areas of gaming, autonomous driving, and many others. So there's a lot of intellectual property there, and it seems like that they're trying to work out how do they break up with Russia, effectively in terms of slicing things up. So what has to stay in Russia, becomes one entity. Anything else, potentially stays as a separate entity. I guess there's rebranding, reorganisation, a fair bit of challenging times ahead for them. And then those I think that they moved their headquarters to Netherlands some years ago. But there'll be all sorts of challenges. Access to technology in Russia is becoming very, very hard. We already know a lot of key people within the tech sector have exited the country. So very, very challenging time for an organisation like this, and I'm sure some would say, well, rightly so. I don't know enough about the all the ins and outs in terms of ownership and those other aspects, whether it's fair to lump all the blame in when you can probably point a fair chunk of it back to Putin in terms of what's been going on in recent times, right? And then the other thing in the mix was there's been some stories around US entities like the Army, Centre for Disease Control, using Russian software that have been disguised as American software. So, we're using this is a local company where we're all good and safe in acquisition of this particular software, but actually the stuff which have been rolled out for varying needs actually ties back to Russia and maybe has some issues there. So the world's got a lot more complex, hasn't it, as the Russia-Ukraine situation has worn on. And we look at Russia, we look at China, other countries, the lines seem to be getting more clearly drawn, and there's a lot more separation. It's quite hard to get your head around what this whole picture is gonna look like. What is and China we've heard reports out of China around their progress on chip development and so on. US are trying to make that very hard, but we kind of potentially going to be slicing and dicing up the world into, I don't know, it seems very Cold War-like in many ways, but probably a lot more complex.
It's a super tense situation. I'd point out that we've got Ukrainian team members in Blackpearl, and so my sympathy for what's happening in Russia is beyond minimal on that side of things. When you've got teammates getting bombed, it's bloody horrible. You can, so any pressure that goes on making, the life more uncomfortable in Russia to bring that whole conflict to, a peaceful a conclusion, I'm all for, from my point of view. I think the thing between US and China is super interesting, and, and it's a tense situation. I wouldn't want to wade into that anything.
Well, let's delve into Blackpearl. Really keen to learn a little bit more around what you're doing. I guess from my reading online and so on, Blackpearl Mail Limited's been around for about a decade, and maybe you can sort of walk us through a little bit about what that business has been doing, and then what the new business looks like, and what sort of changed in terms of ownership structures and investment in recent times.
Perfect. Yeah. So when I've been speaking about Blackpearl, and we're in the middle of a roadshow at the moment, I always flip between the company and the applications.
Yeah.
So you've got the Blackpearl Group as a company, and it has technology that resides at company level, which is essentially a private platform, which is an array of technology that our applications can access. And you've got a strategy at that company level as well, which is certainly around, it's very focused on acquisitions as we move forward, and also about getting, more organic growth out of the applications that sit within the group. And then you've got the applications. So you've got Blackpearl Mail, you've got New Old Stamp, and as we look to acquire, there'll be a series of other ones. So our whole premise is around, and it's really interesting. We were talking about, data so much before, and how, it can be good and it can be bad. So here's the thing that I think is small to medium-sized businesses have never had a harder time than now when it comes to getting more revenue. And, you're talking about Meta before, right? And we're talking about Google, and we're talking about, Apple kind of cutting the the data flow for them. So, last year, it never, the whole algorithms for those pay-to-play platforms changed and became so expensive to acquire customers. So if you think about that for a small to medium-sized business coming out of this sort of COVID and heading into recessions, I mean, what are you going to do to survive and grow? And so when we kind of came up with Blackpearl, it was around transforming a very common, everyday used business tool into something that helps solve that problem, which is revenue. So taking business email in our case, and just for clarity on business email, it's the email that within a company that you and all your team send each and every day to your customers, your potential customers, your vendors, your suppliers, each other, and you'll send it from your phone, your laptop, typically by Outlook, Apple, or Gmail, right? That's your everyday business email. And what we like doing is taking that email and transforming it into a demand generation tool. So something that helps you cross-sell and upsell your goods and services, promote your latest offerings, push out your latest referral programs and things. So it's like a digital billboard for your email, and that's our Blackpearl Mail product. That's what we built. It was extensive R&D because it has a very strong data backbone for that. And so the thing about digital marketing is the accountability for it's great when it works for you, right? It's seeing what's working. And the great thing about Blackpearl is that we give insight back to how people are interfacing with those digital billboards.
Right. So you can put in an email signature that might promote something that's going on in the business. You can have links in the email.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a pretty normal thing to do, right? Here's a link to our website, or here's some details about a product or a service. And so all the emails effectively they get routed through you.
Yep.
You're able to then go strip out the links, replace them with links that are able to be effectively tracked, right? So you can see whether someone clicks on a link, and then you forward it on to whatever the original link was, but you've got that data and it says, hey, Paul Spain just clicked on the link on Nick's email. He clicked on the link around investing or around the product or whatever, and so you're able to collate that, whether it's I guess a textual link or some graphic kind of banner or that's pretty much how it works. And then once you've got that, I guess you end up with a pretty big lot of data. Is that something that how do you then collate that, put that in a way that's actually useful and relevant, and what does it all cost for those that are like, oh, that sounds very interesting?
Well, so you think about use of that data. Firstly, we're talking about this, and I think that you've got to be really ethical with data. So, for total clarity, we don't read email, we don't store email or anything like that. What we're really good at is taking information that's already there. It could be at server level on that server handshake, and as you an email passes from server to server, could be that information, about how people are engaging with that, and collating that and serving up in meaningful ways. And so typically, like at a very low-fi level for customers, and again, our customers are small to medium-sized businesses, and their tool set's pretty limited. So we want to give really simple feedback. So real-time live notifications. Why that's so good is because it helps inform you on your next move. Like the last thing you want to do is start bombarding someone with more emails if they're clearly not interested. Or the other really great use case is what we call back-in-market notifications. So that could have been something that I sent you like 2 years ago, and you go back and relook at it, and I think, Paul's back looking at that proposal. Great, that's interesting. Or you could be an existing customer and go and reopen the contract, in which case you're also probably back in market, but for all the wrong reasons. So at a very lo-fi level, you've got that. The cool thing, and since we are on, a tech podcast, I can geek out a little bit about it. Email is a strong indicator on a next step. So you can get trend lines of how people might engage with your email, and over a period of time, if that changes, it can be indicative of that relationship changing. So I'll give you a classic example. If you and I had been in business relationship for a long period of time and I sent you an email and typically, there was an engagement pattern, you responded quite quickly within a day or maybe within that day or something like that, and then that starts petering off over time, something's gone wrong. And you might not realize it actually, like most people don't. It's actually once it's too late, you think, oh, that's gone bad. So that kind of the ability of measuring engagement, I think, is a huge potential and to help predict churn, predict dissatisfaction with customer service, to see if you've got people basically disengaging with you. And that's where we see the future of what we're doing.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Now, does some businesses have a challenge with the fact that for this sort of thing to work, you don't read their emails, but effectively you've got to parse those emails, so they do have to come through your system, right?
Yep.
To a degree, comes through, you swap bits and pieces out, and then pass it on. I'm presuming that you've got a model that means you're not holding on to that message data. How does that work?
Well, I've got like 2 really well-built servers in my garage, and so that's why we're probably...
I love it. It's like, oh, here we go.
One of them goes down, I just unplug it and plug it in the back. This is the thing about it. It's if you want to do this properly, it's not cheap. Yep, and you get what you pay for in our land, right? And that means you have to have great people. You have to have you have to pay for the best infrastructure. You have to pay for the best architects to architect the way it's done. Like, so we went through a big re-architecting of what, the way that we treated email 2 years ago. Man, it was all blurring into one long year. It was 2 years ago. It was done by Mike Gugamus. He's the ex-CIO of Motorola. He's ex-Green Beret. He is, he's ex-CIO of Insight. This is a serious cat when it comes to security and the way things go.
Yep.
And so if you're not going to invest in that sort of stuff, again, I don't think you have any business with dealing with people's email. And so if you look at our company from the chairman down, Tim Crown, chairman of Insight Enterprises, through to our team within the company and through to our track record, that's really... I guess everyone has to make their own decision on risk versus reward from a benefit point of view. But, the reality is if we're not doing things right by our customers, as I was talking before, then we don't deserve to be in business. You've got to look after your customers, number one. Yeah,
that's certainly an ongoing challenge. And so how does that play out with... you've gone through, acquired New Old Stamp, who have been doing email signatures as I guess a competing or other offering to your Blackpearl mail for for a number of years. I imagine there's you go through an acquisition, there's a journey that could actually take quite a period of time, right? So now, as you become a listed company, you've got your existing offerings, you've got their offerings. And even that sort of listing, I imagine you go from a perspective, I don't know whether you had any, ISO 27001 or other sort of, cybersecurity certifications previously, but now you're kind of putting your head up for, for attack and attention, and those are the sorts of things that you probably got to focus on if you haven't done previously.
No, we've I can see Chris Watson and our security team and Richard and all that. They're like, damn right. They're our guys. They lead up that team. So the good thing about New Old Stamp and Blackpearl is they kind of like, there is a little overlap, but mostly not. So the people that are coming for Blackpearl are really just after a centralized email signature. Yep. And the great thing about that product is it doesn't need routing. So it doesn't need routing, and because of that, you don't get all the great data, and it doesn't necessarily work from all devices like Blackpearl. But if you are
New Old Stamp,
but if you are kind of wanting just email signatures, and you've got kind of a different security profile, then New Old Stamp is just an awesome product. You got the other people that want to solve that revenue problem. They want to sort of turn their email into a demand generation tool. Then that's Blackpearl. And again, so there's something for everyone there. And you talk about the integration. What was super interesting with that New Old Stamp team and our team, the assets in both companies are so complementary to each other. So you'll love this, or I've been talking about this all day, and I can see like people just like nodding happily, right? They have 1.8 million organic site visits annually, and we verified over 1 million as like genuine people. So can you imagine how much money we would have to spend with Meta or Alphabet, for the Blackpearl Mail product to get that quality and quantity of leads? In fact, probably wouldn't even be possible with all the money. So here's the opportunity we have right now is actually applying our budgets and our expertise to help increase that conversion, and then immediately cross-sell the people that want to turn their email into demand generation tools to the Blackpearl Mail product. There is a price differential. Blackpearl has a 5 times larger lifetime value to the Blackpearl Mail Group, the New Old Stamp, but it provides a whole lot more benefit with the data. So we've kind of like already got those cross-selling motions ready to fire, even though we've only, kind of owned them for 30 days. It's already underway. And again, they've got such a great team and they're very driven. We couldn't have got luckier. So that for us is the exciting part of getting those synergies. And our whole acquisition mantra is 1 and 1 should equal 3. That's not just how Wellingtonians do math. I can promise you it's all about making sure that we're never just buying a company for its existing revenue. It's buying it for the forward opportunities that within the group we can extrapolate.
Sure. Now, with them being a Ukrainian company, what have been the challenges in terms of their workforce, right? Because where do you work from? It seems like a pretty large chunk of the population of Ukraine have had to sort of move elsewhere and so on. So, how has that sort of disrupted and impacted the business?
Yeah, well, I should point out they're a US company, but they have a lot of there's a lot of the team members are based there in Lviv, which is right on the border of Poland, and in Ukraine on the border of Poland there. So, hey, that provides challenges, right? You're going to have power outages. Now, not that obviously their servers and everything are all offshore and global. It doesn't affect that. It just when you're trying to communicate with your team members, it gets a bit you've got to have a good degree of tolerance. But I will tell you that we could not, again, hope for better people there. And I've had pictures sent of them when they're in the corridor of their office building, right, because they can't be near windows, literally working off laptops in a closed-off corridor because there's been air raid sirens, smiling, waving. These, you know what? These are the people you want in your company. Can you imagine
resilient.
how hard driving they are and how tough and passionate? They're just... so again, amazing people. I could not speak more highly of their heart, and so you're going to have challenges buying any company around the world or even companies in New Zealand. And as long as you make sure that the culture is a good fit, and I'm not talking about, like different cultures, I'm talking about, do they think about business the same way? Are they aligned? And again, I kind of asked why we're listing on the NZX is because we bought New Old Stamp very heavily with stock. They're all invested in the success of Blackpearl Group as much as the rest of us are. It's not, cashing a check and running. They've got a couple of years earn out to get to where they're going to go. So do you think they're driven to make this work? They've got even more reason for this to work than us, right? It's amazing. So so it's challenges, but I only see the benefits.
Oh, it's fascinating. Well, I hope that works out well. It certainly worries me what's going on over there and the impacts, and been a lot of people who have died. But yeah, we hope that they're able to stay safe, and
Yeah, they're out of the
they're
primary
good
firing
futures
line
ahead. Yeah.
where they are, but I mean, still, it's a hell of a lot of tension to have over you. And again, as I said earlier, the quicker that it can be resolved peacefully and quickly, the better.
Yeah. Oh well, thanks. It's been fascinating to chat. I see you've got a technical documentation section on your website, which I like, covering off security, reliability, availability, and redundancy. So there's a bunch of questions that are answered there from cybersecurity perspective and resiliency and so on. So yeah, that's pretty important stuff. Now you're listing on the NZX under Blackpearl Group. Now, when I was Googling, didn't actually see a website kind of come up on that search. Blackpearlmail.com was coming up. There were sort of news articles and other things. So is that something new that's kind of just going online in terms of the parent entity?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we really wanted to start defining the group as opposed to the product, and potentially, next year, Blackpearl Mail may need a rebranding just to make it a little clearer. Check out blackpearl.com. Guess who finally bought blackpearl.com?
Oh, okay.
Us came up just the other day. We just able to negotiate the sale the other day. It's just propagated and it's up and running. So the group website is there.
Yeah.
And that talks more around sort of, the stocks and the board and a lot of the share investment information, all that's there. A little bit about our technologies and of course, the news and all that stuff. And then, of course, Blackpearl Mail is more just specific to that product. New Old Stamp, we're going to keep, the branding. They've got a very strong brand and market. And so, and as we continue to acquire, those will be brands and companies that come within the group.
Great. And is there sort of a fair bit of sort of data coming together there, at the investor end in terms of breakdown on, revenues and whatnot, sort of how much information is out there at this stage?
Yeah, it's been very a big learning curve for me, because as a compliance listing, you can't talk about the future. So I can't talk about any projections on what we're going to do. I can't, so I can only talk about historical things. Historical stuff's great. We had 244% revenue growth last year for the Blackpearl Mail product. I just saw our September 30 pro forma accounts, right? And so over that last 12-month period, from September 30th last year to now, there's been just under 300% growth. So, the bigger we're getting, the higher we're growing, which is great.
Yep.
What that means for tomorrow, I can't tell you.
Right. So where are you at in terms of your annual recurring revenue?
Yeah, 2.8.
Yep.
And that was up from about 1 mil at January this year. So it gives you an idea. And then in March 2021, we're only at like 250,000 ARR or something around that. So
obviously, the acquisition helps in that mix.
Yeah, they were
well.
1.2 mil worth of it. But our organic growth is really, the part that we feel very strongly about within it. And I think there are some amazing buying opportunities now. And we were talking about earlier, the sort of hard environment that a lot of these tech companies are going to face with lack of access to cash.
Yeah.
That is our big driver for listing. And, I make the joke that just because we're called Blackpearl, we're not like going around ruthlessly sort of acquiring businesses like angry pirates and stripping out the assets and all that sort of, horrible stuff you think about with M&A. We're a company built by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. And so what we think we provide people is a home that they can, if they are looking for a path to exit over a period of time, but they're still really passionate about their baby and they want to grow it, then we're the people to talk to. You can get skin in the game with stocks and Blackpearl. You get access to our technology platform. You get access to the group's marketing assets, and we grow better together, right? So it's about actually getting founders that are still wanting to push forward and seeing their product reach the the growth numbers they're after. It's just do it within the group and get a path to exit along the way. So
it's going to be fascinating to watch and see how that goes, and what other acquisitions that you have ahead. Have you got a few that are kind of not too far off, or you can't sort of talk about?
I've got to think carefully about that. I put it this way: we've got a three-stage acquisition strategy, and phase one is sort of a mop-up of select first-generation email branding and tracking companies. And we stick that off the bat because we understand the code base really well, we understand the market really well, we understand the customers, and there's like supernatural organic growth opportunities by kind of just taking slightly different snippets of that branding market and joining it together.
Okay.
As we extend out, it doesn't really make sense to keep buying $1 million businesses over a period of time, believe it or not. And so we look to get more sort of one step over adjacent technologies, more on that sort of broader digital communication remit, not specific to email, or productivity tools. So there is a big hit list for that first wave. And we're working our way through that list. And, obviously we walk the talk because we're able to actually do the new Old Stam acquisition when we're still private, which is actually, super difficult comparative to having a public company where it's a lot sort of easier issuing stock.
Yeah. Oh, well, exciting times ahead for you. So, best of luck, Nick.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on the NZ Tech podcast today. I hope you've enjoyed listening in. And, of course, a special thanks to our show partners, Vodafone, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, Gorilla Technology, and Deal. And thank you, Nick Lissette, for joining us and, being part of the discussions and
thank you so
sharing
much for
some
having me,
insights
Paul.
on,
It was a
on
blast.
what's happening on the Blackpearl side. So
it's been my most enjoyable thing of the week. It's been a blast. I actually saw the time because you said we're only on for 45 minutes, and I was like, we're running out of time, and I was like getting a bit sad about. I could be here for the next 4 hours talking about tech, man. This is a dream. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I love it. Excellent. Well, thanks again for coming in, and we'll catch everyone again next week. All right, see ya.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.